The Last Sonnet and Interquel to His Kiss, The Guillotine Part 1. The propaganda machine, the screens were everywhere. In the subway stations, they played footage of the Tokyo couple, beautiful young engineers who'd held hands as they jumped. In the grocery stores, holographic displays showed the neural scans, two brains synchronizing, boundaries dissolving, the catastrophic merger that had turned love into contagion. Cascade syndrome is not romantic. It is neurological suicide. The message scrolled across every surface in the city, accompanied by images of psychiatric wards overflowing with the merged, the broken, the ones who could no longer remember where they ended and their lovers began. Maya Chen watched the propaganda from her apartment window, her reflection ghosting over the billboard across the street. She was a copywriter for the Ministry of Public Information, had been for 3 years now, ever since graduating top of her class with a degree in behavioral communication. She wrote the slogans that kept society safe. She crafted the messages that saved lives. Love is temporary. Safety is forever. Protect your mind. Report emotional entanglement. Your brain is not equipped for deep connection. Choose solitude. Choose survival. She was good at her job. Brilliant, even. Her supervisor said she had a gift for finding the exact words that would make people afraid of their own hearts. But lately, Maya had been having thoughts that weren't safe for a propagandist to have. Like, what if the cure is worse than the disease? Like, what if we're killing something sacred? Like, I wonder what it would feel like to merge with someone, to know them so completely that self becomes us. These thoughts came more frequently now, whispered at the edges of her carefully controlled mind. She pushed them down, drowned them in work, wrote 17 new slogans warning about the dangers of emotional intimacy. But they kept rising, persistent as heartbeats. The Shanghai Accord would pass in 3 months. Global vote was a formality. 68% of relationships now resulted in cascade syndrome, and the numbers climbed daily. Love would become illegal because love had become lethal, and Maya Chen would help sell that truth to a terrified world. She turned from the window and opened her laptop. Tonight's assignment: draft the official announcement for when the accord passed. Make it compassionate but firm. Make people understand that this was mercy, not tyranny. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then from the apartment next door, she heard it. Laughter. 2 voices, low and intimate, the kind of laughter that came from being truly seen by another person. Her neighbors, a married couple in their 30s, hadn't shown symptoms yet, but they would. Statistics said they would. Maya closed her laptop without writing a word. Part 2. The Last Poets. The underground reading happened in a condemned theater on the east side, where the city's surveillance cameras had blind spots, and the desperate still gathered to remember what it meant to feel. Elias Mauro had been a poet before Cascade Syndrome. Now he was something else, a chronicler of the end, a man who wrote eulogies for the death of passion itself. His books had been banned 6 months ago, his publisher shut down, his social media accounts deleted. But he still wrote, feverishly, compulsively, as if words could somehow stop what was coming. Tonight, 40 people crowded into the theater's ruins, sitting on broken seats and cracked floors, holding candles that cast shadows on walls covered in graffiti. Remember what we were. Remember what we lost. Remember. Elias stood on the stage where actors had once performed Shakespeare, and he read, "This is the world we built from fear, white walls and whiter lies, where hearts are crimes and touch brings death, and no one dares to cry. We measured love in milligrams, in neural scans and charts, and found it wanting, dangerous, so legislated hearts. But what remains when passion dies? What's left when joy is banned? Just ghosts in human bodies, just empty, reaching hands." The audience was silent. Some wept quietly, a violation in itself, evidence of emotional dysfunction. Others just stared, their faces reflecting the death of something they couldn't quite name. Maya stood in the back, hood pulled low, her ministry credentials hidden in her jacket. She shouldn't be here. If anyone recognized her, reported her, she'd lose everything: her job, her apartment, her carefully constructed safety. But she'd been reading Elias Morrow's banned poetry for months. Each verse a key unlocking doors she'd been taught to keep closed. His words made her remember feelings she'd thought were gone. Made her wonder if the propaganda she wrote was salvation or murder. After the reading, people dispersed quickly, vanishing into the night before the patrols could find them. Maya lingered, watching Elias pack his notebooks, his hands shaking slightly, not from fear, she thought, but from the sheer effort of continuing to feel in a world that demanded numbness. "That was beautiful," she said quietly. He looked up, and something in his expression shifted when he saw her face. Recognition. No, something deeper, something dangerous. "Thank you, though beauty won't matter soon. Can't legislate beauty, but you can make it irrelevant." He smiled sadly. "You work for the ministry." It wasn't a question. Maya's heart hammered. "How did you have that look? The one people get when they've spent too long crafting lies for others and started believing them themselves." He closed his notebook. Which department? She should have lied, should have reported him and disappeared before this conversation became something she'd have to hide. Instead, she said, "Public information. I write the propaganda." Ah, he didn't look angry, just tired. "So you're the one who tells them love is disease. That connection kills. That we're safer alone. I'm trying to save lives. Are you?" He picked up his bag, moved toward the exit. "Or are you just helping them kill us slowly instead of all at once? That's not fair." He turned back, and his eyes blazed with something Maya hadn't seen in years: passion, unfiltered and fierce. "You want to talk about fair? My sister merged with her husband last year. They were so beautiful together, so completely synchronized. The government separated them by court order, said it was for their safety. They both killed themselves within a month. Same day, same hour, different cities. Tell me, Maya Chen, was that fair? Was that your propaganda saving lives?" The name struck her like a physical blow. He knew who she was, had known, maybe, from the moment she'd walked in. "I'm sorry about your sister. Don't apologize. Just stop writing lies." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched into his face, the weight of carrying beauty in a world that called it disease. You're talented, you know. Those slogans you write, they're poetry, in their way. Dark poetry, but poetry nonetheless. You understand language's power. You know how words can reshape reality, make people believe anything. That's my job. And my job used to be making people feel, giving them language for joy, for desire, for the terrible, beautiful complexity of being alive and in love. His voice dropped to a whisper. We're both in the business of moving hearts, Maya, but I'm trying to wake them, and you're trying to put them to sleep. She should have left, should have reported this conversation, this dangerous poet with his banned words and his accusations that struck too close to truth. Instead, she said, teach me. What? Teach me to write like you, not propaganda. Real poetry. The kind that makes people remember what we're losing. She pulled off her hood, meeting his eyes directly. Before the accord passes and poetry dies completely, teach me how to write fire instead of ice. Elias stared at her for a long moment, searching her face for the lie, the trap, the ministry trick. He must have found something else, because he smiled, small and sad and somehow hopeful. Okay, he said, but you should know, poetry is just another form of falling in love. Once you start, you can't stop. And it will kill you, probably. Everything beautiful does these days. I know, Maya said, and realized she'd already begun to fall. Part 3. The symptoms. They met in secret, abandoned buildings, forgotten parks, places the surveillance state hadn't quite reached. Elias taught her to see the world in metaphor, to find truth in images, to write with her whole heart instead of her strategic mind. Stop thinking about your audience, he said during their third lesson, crossing out another line of her attempted sonnet. You're not trying to persuade anyone. You're trying to tell the truth. What does love actually feel like? Not what the ministry says it feels like. What did you feel before you learned to be afraid? Maya closed her eyes, reaching for memories she'd buried. A boy in high school, the way her stomach had flipped when he smiled. A kiss that tasted like summer and possibility. The aching sweetness of wanting someone so badly it hurt. It felt like drowning, she whispered, but willingly, like choosing to go under because the water was warm and he was there, and being apart seemed worse than any death. Yes, Elias' voice was soft. Now write that, she wrote. Week after week, she wrote poems about desire and loss, about the way love carved you hollow and filled you with light simultaneously. She wrote about her neighbors, the laughing couple next door who'd started showing symptoms, about the woman she'd seen on the subway, crying quietly as the neural scanner flagged her for emotional entanglement. She wrote about the world ending, not with violence, but with the systematic murder of everything that made that world worth inhabiting. And as she wrote, something shifted inside her. The careful walls she'd built, the professional detachment, the ministry training, the conviction that her propaganda saved lives began to crumble. She started seeing her work for what it was, complicity in the death of the human heart. I can't keep doing this, she told Elias one night, 6 weeks before the accord vote. They sat on the roof of a condemned apartment building, the city spread below them like a circuit board. I can't keep writing those slogans, knowing what I know now, feeling what I feel, then quit. And do what? Starve. Get arrested for unemployed emotional deviance She laughed bitterly. There's no place in this world for people who won't help enforce the numbness. There might be, after. He looked at the city, his expression unreadable. When the accord passes and love is fully criminalized, there'll be resistance. Underground networks, people who choose risk over safety. You could write for them, real poetry, not propaganda. We'll all be dead by then, or arrested, or merged beyond recognition. She pulled her knees to her chest. Maybe the ministry's right. Maybe love is just neural synchronization that our brains can't handle anymore. Maybe trying to save it is the real crime. Do you believe that? She thought about the poems she'd written, the way words had started flowing from her like confession. She thought about sitting here with Elias, the way their conversations felt like they mattered more than anything she'd done in 3 years of ministry service. She thought about the dangerous warmth spreading through her chest whenever he looked at her, the way her pulse quickened when their hands accidentally touched. "No," she whispered. "I don't believe it." "Then write like you don't believe it. Write poetry that reminds people what they're losing. Write beauty into a world that's forgotten what beauty costs." He turned to face her, and in the dim light, his eyes held entire universes. Write like your life depends on it, because it does. All our lives do. Maya wanted to argue, to retreat back into the safe cynicism of her ministry training. Instead, she reached for her notebook and began to write. Not propaganda, not careful measured words designed to make people afraid. Truth, raw and bleeding and wholly her own. They'll tell you love is sickness, neural pathways gone astray, chemistry, and nothing more, a price too high to pay. But I remember summer nights when souls could touch and spark, when merger wasn't death but birth, when 2 hearts made 1 arc. So let them pass their perfect laws, let safety be their shrine. I'll die with fire in my veins before I kill what's mine. When she finished, her hands were shaking. Elias read the words, and something broke in his careful composer. "Maya," he said, and her name in his voice sounded like prayer and warning both. "We need to stop." "Stop what?" "This. These meetings. This," he gestured between them, at the invisible thing growing in the space they shared. "I can feel it happening. The way my thoughts echo yours sometimes. The way I've started finishing your sentences. These are the early symptoms, the neural synchronization that leads to merger." Maya's chest tightened. She'd read the literature, knew the signs, shared patterns of speech, complementary thought processes, the gradual dissolution of boundaries between self and other. They were falling in love, and falling in love meant dying. "We could stop," she said. "Stop meeting. Stop writing together. Stop before it goes too far." "We could." He didn't move away. "Is that what you want?" The question hung between them like a blade. Maya thought about her apartment, silent and safe. Her ministry job, secure and soul-killing. The years ahead of careful solitude, watching the world empty itself of passion to save itself from passion's consequences. She thought about the poems she'd written, the fire that had rekindled in her chest. The way Elias looked at her like she was a whole person, not just a propaganda machine. "No," she said, "I don't want to stop." "Then we're choosing this, knowing how it ends." His hand found hers in the darkness. "We're choosing merger over safety, death over emptiness." I know. She squeezed his hand, feeling the warmth of him, the rightness. But I'd rather burn bright than fade slow. I'd rather have this, whatever this is, than another 50 years of writing lies. They sat there as the city lights flickered below. Two poets choosing beauty over survival, love over law. Already, Maya could feel it, the way her thoughts had started moving in rhythm with his, the way her heart had begun to beat in synchronization. They were merging, and they had maybe weeks before the cascade took them both. Then let's make it count, Elias said quietly. However long we have, let's write it all down. Every feeling, every moment. Let's leave a record of what we were, what we felt, what they tried to kill in us. A testament, Maya said. A revolution, he corrected. One last sonnet before the world goes silent. They began to write. Part 4. The Shanghai Accord. The vote happened on a Tuesday. Maya watched from her office at the ministry, the screens showing global tallies as country after country approved the measure. The Shanghai Accord making romantic love illegal, criminalizing deep emotional attachment, mandating neural dampening at age 14. 73% approval, higher than anyone had predicted. Around her, colleagues celebrated. They'd done it, saved humanity from itself, protected future generations from the horror of Cascade Syndrome. The propaganda had worked. Her propaganda had worked. Maya felt nothing but grief. That night, she went to the condemned theater where she and Elias had been meeting. He was already there, surrounded by their notebooks, months of poetry, every feeling they'd captured, every truth they'd refused to suppress. It passed, she said unnecessarily. I know. He looked older, exhausted by the weight of bearing witness to the death of love itself. Starting next month, we'll be criminals. Anyone caught in emotional entanglement will be separated, treated, made safe. Saved, Maya said bitterly, echoing the ministry line. Destroyed. He held up one of their notebooks. All this, everything we've written, it's contraband now. Illegal memory. Evidence of the crime of caring. They should have burned it. Should have erased the evidence, protected themselves, chosen survival over sentiment. Instead, Maya said, then let's make it public. What? All of it. Every poem, every piece, every word we've written about what it feels like to fall in love in a world that calls love contagion. She pulled out her laptop, her ministry laptop, with its direct access to the propaganda networks. I can upload it to every screen in the city, make them see what they're killing. They'll arrest you. They'll scrub your mind, I know. She met his eyes, saw her own fierce determination reflected back. But someone has to say it. Someone has to stand up and scream that this is wrong, that we're committing suicide by safety. And we're already dying anyway, aren't we? The merger's progressing. I can feel you in my thoughts now, all the time. We have days, maybe, a week at most. Elias was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled, radiant and terrible and free. The last sonnet, the final broadcast before the world goes silent. Exactly. They worked through the night, compiling their poetry, writing one final piece together, their voices so synchronized now that neither could say where one ended and the other began. Maya felt it happening, the boundaries dissolving, her identity bleeding into his and his into hers. It should have terrified her. Instead, it felt like coming home. poem they wrote was the truest thing either had ever created. This is the last sonnet before the silence, the final verse before the vote goes through. When love becomes illegal, touch is violence, and all the fire in the world turns blue. They'll tell you this is mercy, this is kindness, this careful murder of the human heart, that safety lies in government-approved blindness, that souls were always meant to stay apart. But I remember merger not as sickness, but sacred recognition, soul to soul, when boundaries dissolved and all life's thickness became transparent, luminous, and whole. So let them pass their laws, mandate their distance, we die with fire, not their cold persistence. At 3 a.m., Maya uploaded everything to the ministry's main servers. Not carefully, not trying to hide, she used her own credentials, her own access codes. She wanted them to know who'd done this, wanted them to understand that even their best propagandist had chosen truth over safety. The poems flooded every screen in new penitence. On billboards where warnings about Cascade Syndrome had played, citizens now saw verses about the beauty of merger. On subway displays that had shown neural scans of dying brains, they now read about the transcendence of choosing love over survival. The ministry shut it down within an hour, but an hour was enough. The poems had been seen, photographed, shared through underground networks. The message had spread. We are killing something sacred. Maya and Elias sat in the theater as the sirens approached, holding each other as the merger completed. They could no longer tell where one ended and the other began. They spoke in unison, thought in harmony, breathed as a single entity. Worth it, they asked. Yes, they answered. Always yes. The ministry found them like that, merged beyond separation, hearts beating in perfect synchronization, faces wearing expressions of transcendent peace. They were alive, but unreachable, lost in each other, drowning willingly in the warm water they'd chosen. The officers tried to separate them. Impossible. Their neural pathways had become too intertwined. So they did what the ministry always did with the merged, installed the chips that would slowly, carefully, kill what remained of their individual identities, turn them into docile units suitable for institutional care, erase the danger of their love. But before the procedure, one officer, young, unsure, still human enough to be curious, picked up one of the notebooks they'd left behind. Read a single poem, felt something crack inside his carefully maintained numbness. He put the notebook in his jacket instead of the evidence bag. That night, he read all of it. Every poem, every piece, every desperate, beautiful word about what it meant to love in a world that called love death. And he began to wonder, what if the cure is worse than the disease? Part 5. The last fire 6 months after the Shanghai Accord passed, suicide rates tripled. Not from Cascade Syndrome, from the systematic emptiness of a world without love. People described feeling like ghosts, going through motions without meaning. The neural dampening worked perfectly, keeping hearts separate and safe. But it couldn't give people a reason to want their hearts to keep beating. The ministry noticed, but couldn't admit what it meant. To acknowledge that humans needed love was to acknowledge that they'd murdered something essential. So they adjusted the propaganda. Depression is treatable. Report suicidal ideation. Safety requires sacrifice. But in the underground, in condemned theaters, and forgotten parks and places where surveillance hadn't quite reached, people gathered around copies of the last sonnet. Read the forbidden poetry about merger and transcendence. Remembered what it felt like to be wholly, dangerously themselves. The officer who'd kept Maya and Elias' notebook became a poet himself. He wrote about the hollowness of safety, the death that came from never daring to truly live. His words spread through the resistance networks, joining the chorus of voices saying, "We cannot survive this cure." In the institutional care facility where they'd sent Maya and Elias, something unprecedented happened. Despite the neural dampening, despite the careful chemical separation, their synchronized heartbeats continued. The chips couldn't kill what had merged so completely. The doctors studied them like artifacts, trying to understand how love could persist even when they'd burned away everything that generated it. They found no answer. Some things, it seemed, ran deeper than neurology could reach. 2 years after the accord, the Shanghai facility where Maya and Elias lived burned down, an electrical fire, authorities said. But those who worked there whispered different stories. About 2 patients found in each other's arms, still breathing in perfect rhythm. About notebooks filled with poetry discovered in the rubble. About words that had somehow survived when nothing else did. The poems that emerged from those ashes spread through the underground like wildfire. Maya and Elias' final work, written after merger, when they were no longer 2 poets, but one truth. The fire cannot be legislated. The soul cannot be chipped. The heart cannot be medicated into something safely stripped. They burned our bodies, not our words. They killed our love, not memory. And every verse that still is heard proves merger sets us free. No one knew if they'd died in the fire or if they'd escaped, still merged, still defiant. The ministry claimed the former. The underground chose to believe the latter. Either way, their poetry remained, passed from hand to hand, memorized by those brave enough to risk feeling. The last sonnet became the first anthem of the resistance, the group that would eventually call themselves the Romantics, who would stage their demonstration in Prague, who would refuse to let humanity die quietly. And in apartments across New Penitence, in Sector 4, where the gray people moved through their gray lives, a copywriter's neighbor found a notebook hidden behind a loose brick in the wall they shared, found poems about laughter and merger, and the terrible beauty of choosing to love. She read them in secret, crying for the first time in years, and she began to wonder, what if we made the wrong choice? What if safety is just another word for surrender? What if the fire was what made us human, and we killed ourselves to avoid the burn? These questions spread like contagion, slower than cascade syndrome, but more persistent. They couldn't be dampened with chips or erased with propaganda, because they struck at something fundamental, the understanding that a life without love wasn't life at all, just extended dying. The Shanghai Accord stood. Love remained illegal. But the poetry survived, and wherever words survive, so does fire. So does the memory of what we were, what we felt, what they tried to kill in us. So does the refusal to surrender our souls for the promise of safety. Maya Chen and Elias Morrow died, or didn't die knowing this, that they'd written the last sonnet before silence, that they'd burned bright enough to light the way for others, that they'd chosen merger over emptiness and transcendence over survival, that in a world demanding numbness, every poem was revolution, every verse was defiance, every word was fire, and fire, once kindled, is impossible to completely extinguish. It just waits in the darkness, feeding on forbidden poetry, growing stronger on the breath of anyone brave enough to read banned words and feel something dangerous, growing stronger on the names we refuse to forget. Iris, Thomas, Chen, Marcus, Anna, Valencia, Kale, Marin, Maya, Elias, all the beautiful, terrible souls who chose to burn rather than fade, all the poets who wrote the last sonnets, all the lovers who died with fire in their veins before they'd kill what was theirs. The ministry says the story ends here with the accord passed, love criminalized, poetry banned, the world made safe and gray and endlessly compliant. But those who remember know different. The story never ends. It just goes underground, waiting for the day when enough people ask, what are we without the fire? What are we without the words? What are we without the dangerous, beautiful, terrible capacity to merge with another soul and say, yes, this is worth dying for. The ministry calls this disease. The poets call it being human. And in the condemned theaters, in the forgotten parks, in the places surveillance hasn't quite reached, people still gather to read the last sonnet and remember, we were not made for safety. We were made for fire.